right, so Magnus played this game against Komsky in 2009, and we have a Queen's Pawn opening and a Queen's Gambit Slav defense. And yeah, Magnus had the white pieces. Magnus is gaining some space here on the queen side with pawn to c5, developing black fianchettos the bishop, black castles. Magnus goes back here with the knight. And now Magnus plays g4, and this is kind of intimidating. Like Magnus is gaining space on both flanks. He's already expanded on the queen side, and now here he goes expanding on the king side as well, expanding even more on the queen side and even more pawn to b5. Magnus is just like, give me all the space. I want all the space. He's very greedy. He wants everything he can possibly have. And now, does it look like black blundered a pawn here to you? I mean, Magnus could pretty easily take the pawn on e5, it looks like, but actually he should not, and he does not because of this line. So if he takes, there is bishop to d5, and this is kind of nasty. And let's see what I have written down here. Yeah, bishop takes. Actually, yeah, this was the line. My bad. I mixed up the move order, but then bishop to d5 is the move. And this is a very annoying move because you're pinning the knight to the rook, and the knight's actually undefended. So you do have to defend it somehow. And then there could be ideas of playing pawn to f5 and maybe taking if white takes and putting pressure on the knight. So f3 would be a reasonable move to break the pin, but who wants to play f3? Certainly not Ben Feingold. So would not be a very good idea. So Magnus probably saw all that and didn't choose to take the pawn. Instead, he played the top engine move because he's Magnus. He played rook to c1, pawn to a4, bishop here, and Gadakomsky mouse flips in real life in a way that is completely inexplicable. This move actually happened. I can't really tell you that I understand this move fully. It's a very odd and completely unsound bishop sacrifice by Komsky, and maybe he disliked his position too much, with Magnus attacking on both flanks. So he felt like he had to make something happen, or else he would lose. So he presumably hopes to queen this pawn, but Magnus can cover things. Like when this happens, Magnus has two pieces on the back row. He should be okay. And again, Komsky, is obviously a stronger player than I am, and I won't pretend I fully understand the motivations behind this move, but I still want to use this to teach a lesson. If you squeeze your opponent and outplay them positionally and make them feel miserable, you could force a mistake. Like you want to make your opponent's life difficult both on the chessboard and even psychologically. There's a lot to be said for, the psychological aspect of the aesthetics of a chess position and the power of a person believing that their position is terrible. Like black was actually a little bit better. Engine said like minus 0.3 before this move. And with a normal move, black could have been totally fine. But, from a human perspective, black's pawn on e4 is weak, and Magnus has space on both flanks. So, maybe Komsky felt so bad about things that he decided to look at a crazy move like this. So basically, if you can make your opponent hate their position, you could like lead them into feeling the need to do something desperate like this. So Magnus takes, calling Komsky's bluff, and Magnus knows that not every sacrifice your opponent makes is a good one. If you're not playing an engine, your opponent will make bad decisions sometimes. So you don't always need to fear their moves. They could be wrong, and it's up to you to figure out if they are wrong and then to prove them wrong. So Komsky, as expected, plays pawn to a3, and this was the plan. He's going to try to do something with this pawn, perhaps. He strikes with e5. Magnus plays bishop to g5, and Komsky gives a check. And now tell me in the chat, would you move the king or would you block the check here if you were white?
I would um move the king.
All right, nice. I'll give some time for some more people to answer. And this is not necessarily like a tactical thing where a move is going to be completely winning or losing. It's just kind of a strategic thing. So a lot of people saying block, but the move that is Magnus approved and engine approved is king to f1. That is apparently the best move in this position.
Got it.
And yeah, well done, David. Moving the king is perfectly safe here because, black's not going to be attacking on the king side anytime soon. He doesn't have the pieces in position to do that. And blocking, could potentially, I was thinking blocking with the knight could maybe give black a little bit too much counterplay, maybe. I'm not sure. Blocking with the queen is reasonable because if they trade, you're up a piece, and it makes a lot of logical sense, and it could be completely fine. I mean, this is still good for white, but it's not what Magnus chose. Magnus played king to f1, pawn to h6, and the three top engine moves in this position for white all do not involve saving the bishop. So when you're under attack, um, whoa, I just hit a button. Okay, that was weird. I did not mean to do that. My bad. The computer just did something crazy. I don't know if we've ever seen it do that.
That's always what happens when you press a button.
That was so weird. Yeah, so whenever you're under attack, you don't want to just look to defend or just save your piece. Um, yeah, don't neglect to look at your aggressive moves, even after your opponent has attacked you. So top move is pawn to d5. Second top move is d takes e5. And third top move is b takes c6. So, and this is what Magnus played, the logical one, the one that actually attacks a piece of the opponent, because Magnus is not a computer, he's a human being. So he plays this move, black takes. Now Magnus saves the bishop. He's not completely neglecting it. And king to g2, sort of castling by hand in a sense. Another rook now joins the defense of a1. So Magnus has plenty of firepower to stop this pawn from accomplishing anything. And we see some more moves. Black improves the rook. Magnus drops his knight into a very nice outpost. And, Magnus is a piece up and a pawn up, but the game won't win itself from here. You still have to make your pieces cause as much pain for your opponent as possible. So, you can't just play on autopilot. You do have to make your pieces good and try to really dominate the game and make your extra piece really count as much as you possibly can. So that's what Magnus is doing by putting the knight on this outpost. And Kamsky plays rook takes e2, sacrificing the rook. And when you're already losing, you should think a little bit differently. Like, don't be afraid to sacrifice more material in exchange for counterplay. Because when you're losing, your goal is not to play the soundest moves. Your goal is to cause problems for your opponent and complicate the position because that creates the best likelihood of a big blunder to get you back in the game. So you should have an extremely aggressive attitude when you're losing, which can perhaps actually make playing losing positions more fun because you get to really go on the attack and play fearlessly, sometimes not even being all that concerned about material. You can just sacrifice and try to cause complete chaos on the board, which sometimes can be kind of fun. So we see Kamsky centralizing his queen. Magnus offers a queen trade. Of course, he'd be happy if the queens leave the board. That would just simplify things. Black does trade queens. Here comes the rook. And Black really doesn't have a lot going for him in this position by the looks of things. We see a pawn trade. Here comes the knight attacking both the rook and the pawn. Looks like Magnus is going to win this pawn. And trading rooks would be completely fine here for white. But Magnus opts for this instead because he's Magnus and he likes to be fancy like that. He's going to give up his bishop and then he's going to take the knight. So both minor pieces are going to hang. Magnus just being unnecessarily, unreasonably fancy. And black resigns in this position. Magnus has two pretty nice rooks on open files. He's going to get them active. Um, yeah, black resigned here. So some takeaways are don't sack things without being sure about it. Sacking a piece based on a vague, it seems good feeling is often a dangerous and bad strategy. You should calculate and be as sure as you can be before sacrificing a piece. And likewise, when your opponent sacrifices a piece, calculate as much as you can and don't ignore the possibility that it's totally unsound and that they're completely wrong to sacrifice it. Like, even if it's scary, try to calculate and see if they're wrong to sacrifice, because sometimes you might be able to accept the sacrifice and be totally fine. You're not playing an engine most likely, so you could be able to just win a piece. And also remember to look at your aggressive moves even when you're being attacked. And also don't forget that highly aggressive mentality that you need to have when you're losing, of trying to create problems and chaos on the board so that your opponent can make a mistake. So does anyone have any questions or any thoughts about the game?
I have but one.
Okay.
When you said Magnus was being Magnus, he was being, fancy and stuff like that. Like, he's being magnificent.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's
All
true.
right.
He was.
He was being magnificent.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was it. That was it.
Nice. And what happened? Someone may have, you guys might be wondering, oh, black can just take this and then maybe it's a close position. What happens if black
Checkmate
takes?
on A8.
Very good. Yeah, checkmate.
Nice.
Yep. Well done. Checkmate's coming. Two rooks. They're too active. It's too much activity for Magnus.